Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Sargent number 90. This is a cylinder blocking ring. This is the 3/16 size, and they make different sizes and certainly different finishes of this cylinder blocking ring. And this video will show you a visual tour of what the item looks like. We're going to put some dimensions on it right now. Let's do that. This is going to have an outside dimension of 1.354 on the outside. This is going to have an inside dimension of 1.18 inch, 1.18. This is 3/16, so this ought to be 0.1875 thick. My caliper tells me 0.1876, so sure, 3/16 of an inch thick. Now this is marginally magnetic, which tells me that it's not brass, even though they're saying that it's 26D, which doesn't tell me that it's brass, but they list the base materials as stainless, brass, and bronze. So I'm thinking this is probably stainless, because stainless does have very marginal magnetic properties that you can observe when stainless has been worked or machined. So I'm thinking this is, substituted, something that they substituted when satin chrome was specified. There's some supporting documentation below this video. Let's switch to the screen view and take a look. Okay, so here is the item that we are looking at. Okay, and we're going to have some documentation down below in no particular order. There is a link below this. Sorry, we're voice recording. There's a link below this video to the document called Cut Sheet that will show you the 90 blocking ring and some of its sister products. But the 90 blocking ring used with rosettes as a spacer when mortise cylinder projects from face of door as shown above. I'm thinking they mean door shown below. Consult the 8200 series catalog for blocking ring application details. That's the next linked to document that we'll look at next. Brass, bronze, or stainless, we discussed that. 1 3/8 diameter, available in a 1/16, 1/8, 3/16, quarter, and 3/8 thicknesses. If you needed to do half of an inch or something longer, you'd be stacking these together. That wouldn't be necessarily a bad thing. There is no chamfer on the edge of this blocking ring at all, or at least not that I can detect with the naked eye. So there's no chamfer on the edge here, so stacking them together may not be such a problematic situation. Specify thickness when ordering. It's not enough to just order a Sargent 90. You have to then say the thickness and the finish, and those finishes are polished brass, satin bronze, oil rub bronze, powder coated oil rub bronze equivalent, an antique bronze with a lacquer. 20D, that's going to be black. 26 is polished chrome, satin chrome, polished stainless, satin stainless steel. Okay, here's an example of what it would look like, and we'll discuss what this is used for at the end of the at the end of the video. Okay, so they're basically showing where your blocking ring could certainly be used to space your unit. Can also go underneath the head of the cylinder as well. We'll talk about that in a second. The 1 KB is going to be a standard ring that would come with your mortise locks. 97 is a bit of a tapered. And the SB is more of a security option because it's highly tapered. You don't want to present a surface area that someone can get a wrench around. But we'll talk about that. The link below this video as well to the blocking ring page. This is a chart that shows in these tables door thickness, columns, rows that have cylinder lengths in them, sorry. The cylinder size is listed 41, 42, and 43, depending on what cylinder you're using. The only difference between these is the length. It will then tell you what cylinder collar and or blocking ring to use in these tables, again, based on that door thickness. Okay, it's unusual that they would have cylinder only listed, which means you would not have the requirement of a blocking ring, and that's because, or a cylinder collar, because it's escutcheon trim is why. So that's very handy. Now there's a link below this video as well to the manufacturer's page, which is here, and that will allow us to review not only all of the Sargent products that we sell by way of these page links, but a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog and other encyclopedic documents as it pertains to Sargent, okay, such as parts manuals, such as a key systems manual, a technical manual, archival catalogs. If you wanted to see what Sargent was making 150 years ago or thereabouts, you could do so, or at least 125 years ago. Sargent's been in business for about 170 years or thereabouts. Fun fact about Sargent: there is a population of people of Italian ancestry in the Connecticut area where Sargent was operating at the time, because Joseph Sargent, the founder of Sargent, needed highly skilled workers. He, as the tale goes, he took a trip to Italy to locate such highly skilled workers, and he did. Brought them back to America with him, and those folks worked in the Sargent factory and are in that part of New England as a result of that original immigration by those Italian folks. Fun fact. Let's wrap up this video on camera. So where are you going to use this item? Well, first of all, any place where you need to build off, any place where you have unused real estate from the face of the door to the underside of the cylinder head, the underside of the mortise cylinder head, or even a rim cylinder, but mortise cylinders most typically, is where you would use this. The advantage of a blocking ring is that while you might be able to get a wrench onto this, it's just going to spin. That's the advantage. You also saw in that diagram where inside of the 1K, I think it was the 1KB or 1KSB, I forget that part number. It's a 1KB. It would fit inside of there so that you can more reasonably block your cylinder accordingly. The point being is you can use that 1KB cylinder, and by going with different thicknesses of blocking rings, you can put together a solution so that the length of the cylinder, given where it's installed in the center line of the door, which is not always in the center line of the door for the lock, and the door thickness, to tailor the application so that you have a clean looking appearance. In almost all instances, you will need a cylinder collar, a cylinder blocking ring. In almost all instances. It's very unusual to not require one. And again, it's a feature that the cylinder ring will just spin. And this is ever so slightly probably larger than the outside diameter of the head of the cylinder, and that's by design. We don't want people grabbing onto the head of the cylinder if they're trying to wrench that off, okay? And this will just spin as a result. Why do you need cylinder collars, blocking rings, a combination of both used together, or one or the other? Because the length of the cylinder is generally not perfect for the application. You generally will always have a cylinder that is longer than what would be dimensionally or physically required to have. A typical example could be a hollow metal door that you're installing a mortise lock onto. The door is 1 3/4 thick, and your lock is centered in the thickness of the door. And be mindful, they aren't always centered in the thickness of the door. One way to, if you have a 3-inch thick door, but you can't get your hands on a longer cylinder for your application, let's back up. Let's say that you have a 4 or a 5-inch thick door. We did a 4-inch thick door, and the client needed a Sargent, coincidentally, large format restricted core, a restricted cylinder construction. I don't remember if it was degree or signature, or if it was, I'm flaking out on the third one. Degree, signature, well, there's another one that I'm forgetting. Obviously, they're Queso F1 as well. Anyway, they could not get the large format length of the cylinder necessary for the job. Sargent couldn't make it, or They could, but the lead time was going to be several weeks, and we didn't have that time. So what the client did was we went with the longest cylinder we could and then biased the installation of the lock body towards that side, because we did need a thumb turn on the other side, but it was not a problem to get a thumb turn and then add extensions to it. And that's something that we can do for you as well. If you needed a 2.5-inch length mortise thumb turn, we could extend standard thumb turns. But the point of the matter is we were able to bias that lock body to fit the length of the cylinder. But even in that case, you still need a cylinder collar, because you don't want the head of the cylinder going right to the face of the door, even though you could. But there's not a lot of difference between the thickness, the diameter of the mortise cylinder body and the outside diameter of the head of the mortise cylinder. And cylinder collars, they're used to fill that space, but they're also used as beautification hardware as well. If you have any sort of, oblong sort of cut profile that's been put into the door, the cylinder collar helps cover up a mucked up hole. I did just have a client who ordered the original design, very unusual, was to have the face of the cylinder flush with the door because they wanted the hardware to bury into it. Well, the fella on the site went ahead and drilled holes, and he admittedly drilled them larger than needed. So we had to rework the math to make sure the length of the cylinder would tolerate the thinnest possible collar that we could stick underneath there, and it did work out. But be mindful, when you're thinking cylinders, next thing you're thinking about is what blocking ring, what cylinder collar do I need, and what size is it? Kind of what I think about is, where is the lock body in the door? Let's just say 1 3/4, our hollow metal door mortise lock, it's centered in there. So half of the thickness of the door is 7/8. I want my cylinder to end just shy of the center line, because let's imagine I'm putting two back to back. I would want a 1/16 of an inch between the two of them. So I really need a cylinder that's no longer than 13/16. Well, you're not going to find that. Okay, you'll find 15/16, 1 inch, 1.125, 1.25, whatever it is, and you're going to use a cylinder collar or a blocking ring. Your next step is to figure out what length do I need. That's the math that I work. You might also be relegated to a cylinder that your client requires, and you can only get it in certain lengths. They won't make a 7-pin small format in a 1-inch like cylinder. So you're dealing with 1 3/8, 1.5, whatever it might be. And on an 1 3/4 thick door, you're going to need a blocking ring. There's a grocery store that I would go into all the time, and they had bi-parting automatic doors, and the active door of the two had a small format, removable, interchangeable core and a huge blocking ring on there, because it was just an Adams Wright storefront hook bolt that kept the two doors together. And yeah, you're going to need that. Okay. The name Sargent is quite synonymous with many things commercial hardware related, namely exit devices, door closers, lock sets. Exceptional technical support at Sargent under the ASSA ABLOY umbrella of companies. Her sister companies would be Norton, Yale, Corbin Russwin, McKinney, Pemco, Rockwood, Adams Wright, Hess, Folger Adams, Securitron, on and on and on. ASSA ABLOY is a good organization to turn towards when you have a requirement for high security cylinders. And the one sister company I neglected to mention, of course, was Medico, who dominates the North American market for high security cylinders. And be mindful of that. That if you're looking for high security cylinders, you can do it from Corbin Russwin, Sargent, Yale, Medico, and do it very well. Any questions on the number 90 in a 3/16 thickness or any other Sargent product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.